Hello, everyone, and welcome to Looking Up. We are a podcast for Christian women, and I am Carla Moore, and I am one of your hosts, and I'm here with Kathy Pollard, your other host. And our purpose in this podcast is to always send you to the Bible, send you to God, and we are wanting to glorify God, and we're wanting to encourage others to do the same thing, and to look and see the good in life and see how we can help others to see God working in our lives. We have a topic today that Kathy and I are, shall we say, a little bit nervous about, because it's a serious one, but we want to do it justice. And but we also just want to have a conversation about it. And sometimes those hard conversations are the ones that we really need to have the most. So we have already prayed about it, and we are looking forward to talking about it. But first, we're going to just have some fun talk, and let me know how you're doing today, Kathy. What's going on in your life?
Well, I'm having to shift gears a little bit because you just introduced the fact that we're going to have this really deep conversation, and I've got cheese on the brain because I just
What kind of cheese?
Every kind of cheese. I registered for a live dairy workshop, but the focus is on cheese and making cheese from milk and all different ways and tools, and all about culture and enzymes and on and on it went. And it was only supposed to last for an hour, but I literally had to cut it off to get ready to start recording this podcast because it went longer than it was supposed to. So I feel like I'm trying to mentally shift gears from cheese to this.
That is a big switch.
That's a big switch.
Well, so what kind of cheeses are you going to plan to make?
I'm going to definitely be making mozzarella cheese, and I wanted, cream cheese, all the easy ones, ricotta cheese, cream cheese, and all that kind of stuff. But I also want to learn how to make cheddar and cheeses that you have to age. So we'll see how that goes.
I'd be glad to taste test. I love cheese.
I do too.
You'll be making even more homemade pizza than normal.
That's not really
Is it the kind? It's
ahead.
not the same kind?
It is the same kind. I was just going to say that's not really a good thing that I'll be making more homemade pizza than normal.
Pizza is always a good thing. Is it the kind that is in water? Sometimes you see at the grocery store, like the fresh mozzarella, they store it in, I don't know if it's water or some kind of other liquid.
Yeah, the brine. You can store it in brine.
Is it just salty water then? Why do they do that?
I don't know.
Freshness, maybe.
Don't ask me the technicalities because I don't know any of that stuff yet.
You're gonna learn.
I'm going to learn.
Yeah. Yes. I want to come hang out at your house when you learn all the cheese. Cheese is the best.
And I want to learn how to make sour cream and cream cheese, and I already know how to make butter. Feta. Yeah, I want to try that. There's all different kinds of things.
Good.
So
where was it? Who was hosting it? Like, was it somewhere in Kansas or somewhere?
She lives just under the Canadian border in North Dakota. I can't remember, but I know she's just under the Canadian border, and I don't know her name, but she's the homesteading family, and she does workshops. So all about cheese making and things like that. So
I hope this cow knows what plans you've got for it. She better be ready to put out a lot of milk.
She probably has her own plans.
Yeah, she may have no idea. She's headed to a good place.
I'm sure we're both in for a rude awakening of some sort.
Yeah. So do you have any new information as far as when she might come?
No, Jeremy said that she's due any day now.
So it'll be after she calves? And then you'll get the calf too, or no?
If it's a girl, no, because the breeder is going to keep her. But we are getting the Jersey and 2 bull calves. So whether one of them is hers or from another, I don't know. All I know is we're getting her and 2 bull calves.
Well, I have no idea how that works. Well, but I guess if she has a little girl calf, do they even call it a little girl calf? I'm showing my ignorance here. Will some other mama cow will feed her?
Yes, or they'll bottle feed her. I don't know what their practices are. Yeah.
Well, you're in for a whole lot of learning, and you're gonna have to teach me a whole lot of stuff too. Hey, you just said today, and we didn't even talk about this before, 30,000 plays.
Yes, over. I just happened to glance at it. It was at 30,300 and something. And
Wow.
again, that's just 4 platforms. And
So Spotify and Apple and
Google and Amazon, I think. That's just those 4. And I know we're on other platforms, and that also doesn't include the YouTube plays. But that number just looks official because that's what pops up when I check the stats. And I was checking something else actually, and I saw it and I was like, when did that happen?
Yeah, that's very cool. We're so appreciative of everyone who's listened and shared. I noticed that Jill Parham, and I met her last year the first time at PTP, but she invited, I don't know how many people. I just saw this come across my feed the other day, or I guess I was looking in the group and it said so-and-so was here. Jill Parham invited her and her and her. It's like 30 women. So we are very appreciative of everyone who has shared the group and shared the podcast. And we pray about it a lot, and we're just grateful for all of the encouragement that we've received.
Yes, we are. And it's exciting when you're just kind of trolling and then you see that somebody has shared it and, they didn't tag you in it. You just happen to run across it. And we're so grateful for all the encouragement, and everybody's been very kind, very supportive, and it's been great. Yeah. So what have you been up to? Have you been thrifting?
I did a lot of thrifting this week. Well, not a lot. I guess I went a couple of times, and both times were good. I found some good stuff, but the best thing that I found was it's an anti-gravity chair. Have you ever seen one of those? You even know what it is?
Is that one of those inversion?
Yeah.
Chairs?
But it looks like a recliner. And I took some pictures. I saved it. I'll send it to you later. Put it in the group next week. But it was at my favorite Goodwill, which is in kind of downtown Austin. And I walked in. John happened to be with me, but he was looking at something else. And I saw this chair back there. The kind of modern looking ones with the wooden handle that you see everywhere now, and leather. It was made out of leather, black leather with wooden handles, rounded handles. And it just looked like a recliner, kind of a simple recliner. So I went back there, and then I could tell that it was like leaning back, and it, like the leg part of it didn't go down. It was just, a elongated shaped chair. So I sat down in it. When I did, it went backwards. Like my whole head went almost to the floor, and my feet are like flying up in the air. And, I'm looking around to see if anybody's watching me. It was so embarrassing. And then I thought, how am I going to get out of here? Because I'm not as young as I used to be.
And I can't.
I did. I almost had to ask for help. One of the ladies came around the corner. She said, "Are you okay?" And by that time, I'm trying to grab onto the handle and pull myself up. And that's how you do it. That's the only way I know how to do it. Maybe there's a way that I haven't figured out yet, but you have to hold on to the handles and then sit up and let your feet go down.
And you decided to bring that home. Is that a trap for unsuspecting guests?
Yeah. Yeah. Please sit here.
Yeah.
Sit here and I'll take care of you. No, anyway, it was neat. And so John was in there too. And I said, okay, come check out this chair, but be careful. And of course I was there to help him get up, but he has back trouble sometimes. And that kind of chair, I started doing a little bit of research on it, and like $1,500. And I couldn't find a brand in. I found one later, and I think it's a company that isn't in business anymore, but it's still it's got a high resale value. So it was $20, and it's real leather and solid wood, and then he likes it. He goes in there in his office in the morning and sits down and tilts back, and I walk in there and see his feet in the air. So that was one thing that I found, and you're going to laugh at this other thing that I found.
Okay.
For $3.49. Another Stanley cup.
Now you have a collection.
Well, I have two. Yeah. The other one I got for $3.25. This one was $3.49. And I told you this before, I kind of resisted that whole trend because it is trendy. It's just kind of a trendy thing. But you also know how much I use my insulated cups. I use them for hot and cold. And this one is actually keeps ice even better than my Yeti cup does. So pretty excited. And it was like brand new. I even thought that somebody had maybe put theirs down on the shelf, and I was kind of looking around to see if someone was going to come back for it. And then I lifted it up and there's a price tag on the bottom.
You lifted somebody's iced latte.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, well, there's a price tag there, $3.49. So it has the straw and the lid. I don't ever use the lid because I like the ice, but so I found that, and I found a couple of other things, and anyway, it was a good thrifting week.
All right, so it really is a magical power of yours, because Neil and I went to a couple of Goodwill stores last weekend before he left town, specifically looking for jars, just plain glass jars, because a lot of times when I take flowers somewhere, I'm using my canning jars, my mason jars, like the quart size, and those things can be hard to find sometimes when you really need them. So I'm trying not to give those away. And I thought I'll just look for regular jars, like somebody's washed out a pickle jar or something. And we found them in there, and they were outrageous.
Like
$6 or $7 each.
Wow.
We found one small half pint size canning jar used that they wanted $8 or $9 for.
Well,
and they were all
because of the time of year.
And jars,
because everyone's looking for them.
I mean, even jars that it was obvious they just washed something out of the refrigerator, and sold it, $4 or $5. And I'm thinking, you could buy it brand new with the ingredients still in it for that price,
And go get some pickles.
I was getting so frustrated. I thought, you have got to be kidding me. And looking at Neil like, I don't understand how Carla does it. You find a Stanley cup for $3. I can't even find a used pickle jar for less than $9.
Okay, maybe it's magic power. No, did you say it was a Goodwill you were at?
Yes.
Well, go to some like senior citizens thrift center or something like that. Well, but the time of year makes a difference.
Well, we ended up going to a couple of antique stores, and we actually found some jars and things in there for way better. I thought, well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Sometimes they know what they have, and they know what season it is, and people are canning. And so that's, they're out to make money. So, well, anyway, it was a good thrifting week. What about your garden? Did you pull some more good stuff in?
It is, yes. Just still bringing in lots of green beans and tomatoes and bell peppers, and still waiting on the okra. I do have a sugar baby watermelons getting really close, and some butternut squash that are getting really close. So
have you had any trouble with bugs or critters getting after your stuff?
Not really. I mean, we have evidence of Japanese beetles on my zinnias. But as far as we haven't had any issues with them. I've pulled a couple of hornworms off of our tomato plants, but that's about it. No problem, no pest problems.
I can't remember if you have it fenced, the garden. So I guess you
because our
like
raised
big
beds,
animals out.
Yeah,
deer.
Our raised beds are in the inside of our fence in the immediate backyard.
Yeah. Well, I have to confess that I kind of gave up on my little herb pot.
Oh, what? Oh.
Yeah. Well, it was really, really hot out there. And I think because the pot itself was really only about, 4 inches deep, I just think it wasn't deep enough for it to have good roots. And it literally, it really was very hot. And
Did it die?
I watered it every day. We've been gone the last 2 days. Well, we left yesterday morning, just got back a little while ago. And John went out there and said, it's not looking good. So the oregano is okay, but the basil is not great. And the dill is really dried out too. So I don't know.
Well, what I've been doing, because I always feel sad when the outdoor herbs start dwindling down, is I'm bringing in a bunch. I'm propagating them and bringing them in. So all I'm doing is snipping them and putting them in jars and water in my kitchen window until they start getting their little roots, and then planting them in little pots of soil. And so that way I'll have plants already established and going in the house still when things start winding down out there.
So you'll grow them inside through the fall and winter?
It probably won't make it all the way through the winter, but it'll just extend it a little bit more.
Is that what you mean by propagate? Just putting it in growing roots?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just making little babies.
Yeah. Well, did you see I have a new hatchet?
I did. I did.
I had fun with that thing.
Armed and dangerous.
Yeah. Well, I did learn a few things, and John gave me the safety speech, and I know that they really it's sharp. And I learned that it's better to take your glove off before you swing it, because my glove is not super tight. So if I swung it with my glove on, it kind of slipped a few times. And I wasn't ever like slinging it, but basically what I wanted it for was on the cedars. I'll try to get branches off. From the ice storm, they're so dry that some of them I can just kick with my foot and they break off, and then I'm hauling them off to the burn pile. But then there's some that are still alive that I'm just trying to trim up and kind of get the underbrush gone. And so anyway, I'm just kind of cutting branches off of cedars. But I did also learn that it's not a good idea to stand under a dry cedar and tap it with your hatchet, because then you get rained down on with the dry cedar needles. And so the few days that I did that, I was washing cedar out of my hair. I had cedar needles everywhere.
Did you get blisters?
Anyway, no blisters. I was mostly using the loppers. I was using the loppers, and then things that I couldn't get with those, and I would get the hatchet after. But
look at you doing all these tough jobs.
Well, I told John yesterday, it's just been therapeutic to be outside. And I never really was much of an outside girl. And this is something strange. I think that some of it's because we don't have a lot of wasps this year, and probably because of the ice storm, because I don't like flying, stinging things. They scare me. And I've seen spider webs and stuff like that, but those just don't seem to bother me as much. But if something flies at me, I'm going to make a fool out of myself running out of its way. So anyway, that has been good, because there haven't been as many flying things. And it's just, I put the music on out there, and I've gotten lots of exercise and haven't lost any weight, but maybe I put some muscles on.
Yeah. And it's probably good for your mental health and peace of mind, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Neil's been gone this week.
Yes, he was holding a gospel meeting, and it was kind of cool because it was close enough to where his parents lived that he was able to stay with them and commute to the meeting. I think it was about a 45-minute drive for him back and forth, but it was good for him to get to spend some time with his folks. And so he's been gone, and I'm so boring when he's gone, because I eat the same thing every day.
We eat what you want.
Yeah, and it's just easy, and I don't have to think about it, and I can spend time doing other stuff that I want. It used to be that when he would leave town, I would buy all this bad stuff. I think I've talked about this on here before, but junk food, and that's when I would get the powdered donuts, because Neil doesn't like them. And now I don't even do that anymore, because you can't really get away with that anymore.
So what did you eat?
I had homemade yogurt with fresh peaches every morning for breakfast, and then a BLT every day for dinner.
Yeah.
Oh, we got tons, and I put fresh basil on mine, so it was just the perfect garden meal for me. So
homemade sourdough?
No, I bought some.
Yeah. Well, so it's not completely.
It was sourdough,
homemade.
but I didn't make it. But Neil brought a stack of pictures back with him today. He just got home, so he just showed me this stack of pictures, and one of them. Do you remember a couple episodes I talked about? I loved it when Emily came over here and we were chopping cabbage, because it reminded me of when I would spend time with my mother-in-law snapping green beans. He found a picture. I don't know if you can see this for those of you who are watching.
Who all's there?
So that is me. Look at that 90s hair. That is mid 90s right there. Neil's mom, Neil's aunt, and Neil's grandma. And we're all sitting at his mom's kitchen table, snapping green beans and talking away for hours.
Good times.
And I didn't even know this picture existed. So
Did he hear you talking about it, and that's why he brought it home?
Well,
or did he just find it?
He may have, I don't know. He may have, I mean, he does listen. But he brought home some wedding pictures and pictures of when we were first married, and just all kinds of goodies he found over there in their house. So
memory lane.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, should we? I'm sort of dreading it in a way.
So
get
let's
on to
just
our
take
topic, or do
the
you have something
plunge.
else?
Let's just take let me see.
Maybe we should pray again. I'm building it up, and it's a great topic. It's something we need to talk about.
It's like it's a well. It's a deep well, and we're just going to be doing like a little ladle full, little ladle of a conversation.
Yeah, but it really is a serious thing. So, and the reason, we've kind of been toying with this for, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, because I had a question from a young woman who's a friend of mine. And then I heard it again from someone else, another young woman, not the exact same thing, but similar questions. And there are things that I've thought about and things that I have struggled with. And so I know if I'm hearing it from young women, if I'm the age that I am and know that I've experienced some of these questions, and I just think it's something that we should address. But what we're going to talk about is, it's sort of scattered, I mean, it's related, but making it worse, aren't I?
No.
We're going to talk about God, but how do we know beyond a shadow of doubt that God is real? And why did God do things the way he did them? Why did Jesus have to die? That's something I know that my little grandson has said before. Why did Jesus have to die? And that's something that kids forever have asked. Why did Jesus have to die? And so it's not an easy question to answer. And I will freely admit right up at the very front of this that I don't know all the answers, that these are things that I've struggled with over the years, and still in a lot of ways, I don't know all the answers to, but I have reached the point in my life that I completely trust God. And I know that if he says something is true, it's true. And if he tells me to do something, there's a reason for it, even if I don't understand it. And, when you have kids, you have to tell them that sometimes. You just have to say, do you trust me? And by that time they have learned to trust you. And then you just say, then just do what I'm saying. You don't have to understand. And sometimes we say it a little bit different than that, don't we? But we're just going to talk about some things like that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
You just do what I say. Don't ask any questions. And that's not what God does. God gives us a lot of, but God gives us a lot of information. But we've tried to put some of that together, and we've each come up with some answers and some reasons, and we may not get through all of them, but we're going to try to do it justice. And we'd welcome any of your feedback and your comments, those of you who are listening, and things that you have studied and have come to understand. I think this would be a great discussion for us to have in the group. If we need to lean on each other when it comes to topics like this and learn from one another. And Kathy and I do that with each other, not just this topic, many other topics, but we bounce things off of each other. And so that's what we want to be here for. But
I think it's what you said is such a great foundation for this whole topic, this whole conversation, because there's a lot of questions that people might bring up that we never even think of. And sometimes we can't know an answer, unless God has specifically said. We might be able to hazard a guess, but some things we won't have an answer for. But like you say, it's a matter of trust. And I remember several years ago, one of our sons was questioning about why would God create a world full of people knowing that the majority of them will be lost. And he was talking about the narrow way and the wide way passages in Matthew. And, at the time, it scared me to hear that kind of a question come from his lips, because it made me think he was struggling with his faith and, oh no, what's going on? But I really shouldn't have reacted that way. And I really think that it's so important that we create an environment where people feel comfortable enough to ask the questions. Absolutely. Because the truth can stand it, the truth can hold up to it. And if you're not asking those questions, how can your faith be your own? How can you really have confidence in it? And so I was thinking that when people are struggling, or maybe they, in their minds, they feel like they're wrestling with doubt because they don't know the answer to these things, I don't think they need to feel bad about that. And I don't think we need to make them feel bad about that. It doesn't mean they're necessarily having a faith crisis, or that something's wrong with them. Sometimes you just have a thought And it might bother you that you can't come up with the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah. I was thinking along the same lines that questions are good, and that a lot of times our reaction, what is it that we do when we're questioned about something that we don't know the answer to? And I think a lot of times I used to, I try not to anymore, but we get scared. I'd get scared because first of all, like you said, you kind of wonder, is your child having a faith crisis? And second of all, why can't I answer it? Am I having a faith crisis? And to not be able to explain something that seems like it should be pretty basic, but it's not. Sometimes we bluff our way through things and maybe try to answer something and not really give a good answer at all. And I've done that before, and I think I made things worse. In fact, I'm sure I made things worse because I think I just caused more doubt in the mind. If I just need to say, sometimes I don't know the answer to that question, but I want to find out. And sometimes I think I've gotten defensive too, because, we've talked before about sometimes fear makes me angry. If I'm afraid of something, it makes me angry. And so I think probably I have been defensive when I have been asked questions and didn't know the answer to them, because it's kind of scary. But God is so much bigger than our questions. And one of the things over the years that has convinced me of the truth of Christianity is that we've said in the churches of Christ, we have always said, we want to change. If we're doing something that is not in the Bible, or we're doing something wrong that the Bible doesn't talk about, we want to change. We want to do it the way the Bible says to do it. So please tell me if I'm doing something wrong or not doing it the right way with the right motive. So do we really mean that? Do I mean that? So I just think that God is big enough for our questions, and we need to be brave enough to face them and try to find the answers to them.
And that's a good word. And that may be why I was a little bit fearful about this topic, is it, in a sense, it does take some courage and bravery to delve into something like this, especially when it makes you wonder about, what if you can't come up with an answer? What if the answer doesn't sound adequate or convincing enough? There's a certain level of trepidation in some of these questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the two young women, but they come from, I want to say, somewhat similar backgrounds. They come from backgrounds of faith. One of them has wandered, and she's, as the parable says, she's in a far country right now, and I love her dearly. I mean, she's like a daughter to me in a lot of ways, and so I don't want her to think that because she's got these questions or because she's wandered from God that I love her any less. I pray for her more, and I worry about her more, in the sense that I want her to return to God. The other young woman is in a different place. She's still she's wandered. I thought one of them has wandered and the other one has wondered. But one of the questions that got me to thinking about this was maybe a month or so ago. And she said, how do you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God exists? But she went further than that, and because I asked her to elaborate a little bit more. And so I asked her, what do you mean? And kind of asked her for some more details. And she, trying not, I don't want to read it necessarily, but to try to paraphrase what she said. Basically, she said that she felt like the relationship between God and his children was toxic and manipulative. And so I asked her for some more clarification, and she said, well, if my earthly father were to say to me that you are lost without me and you're nothing without me, and she just had a lot of questions about that relationship between God and his children. And it just got me to thinking that how skewed our perspectives can be sometimes when you don't really want to believe God. You can hear someone say, you're lost without me, or you can hear someone say, you're lost without me.
And it made me think, or the dictator.
Yes, exactly. It made, and I gave her this example because it helped me, but to think about my grandchildren in the middle of a busy city street, just standing there, just in my mind, I was picturing Jackson and Emmy. They're 6 and 5 years old, standing in the middle of a busy street in New York City by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They might think they know where they're going, but they don't. But I know what's about to happen. And, I would want to swoop in there and grab them, pick them up, and take them where they needed to go. But the situation that we're in with God is He's given us free will to choose which way we're going to go. We don't have to choose Him. He's begging us to choose Him, and He's given us all the direction we need, but yet we don't choose Him sometimes. So for God to say you're lost without me, it's not a vindictive you're lost without me. It's I want to help you and let me show you the way. And I've got all the ways that you need, and I've got the directions, and I love you, and I want to protect you. That's what it means when God says you're lost without me. You're nothing without me. It's just it depends on our perspective and what we want to believe, and who's talking to us. I think that is a huge thing too. Who are we listening to? You think about Satan, who is the father of lies, and the people that he uses on earth to continue those lies and to propagate those lies. And so who are you listening to? Is it somebody that wants you to believe that God is vindictively saying that you're nothing without me? Or is it are you listening to people that really want you to know and understand that God wants what's best for you,
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the part about the free will and the freedom to choose, because I ran across that C.S. Lewis quote. Did you come up with that one also? No. But it really didn't fit anywhere under my 3 reasons. So I wasn't sure if I was going to get to share it. Yeah. But he said, C.S. Lewis, why then did God give them free will? Because free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. A world of automata, of creatures that work like machines, would hardly be worth creating.
Yeah, that's a good one. Is that from your Christianity, or did it say?
It didn't say. Yeah.
I just actually last week read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for the first time in my life.
Whoa.
And yeah. And I haven't read the Chronicles of Narnia. I think I want to do that next, but it was an interesting allegory, and I enjoyed the book and loved what it had to say. But I wondered what you might think about what is it? Why do people not want to believe in God? Have you thought about that? Why do people not want to believe about God? Believe in God?
Well, I feel like I've thought about that in the past, and maybe my answer is too harsh or trite. And in my mind, I've always kind of thought, well, if you believe in God, that means you're accountable.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe in God, you can just do whatever you want. But that might not necessarily be true. I don't know.
I think it is for some.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I wrote a few things down. One of them is that people see hypocrisy in us, and they see the attitude of superiority that we might have sometimes, or they might perceive it that way. I'm not going to say that we always have that attitude that they think that they see in us, but they do see hypocrisy in Christians often. And, I know I've been guilty of that, but it's hard to say. This is something that my mom has always told new Christians, is that people are always going to disappoint you. I mean, that's just, people are always going to disappoint you because we're human, but God will never disappoint you. And so we put our faith and trust in God and not in people. But our hypocrisy, I think, really affects people that don't want to believe in God. I also think right now that it's a little bit trendy to rebel and to not believe in God and to doubt and to do what you can to discredit God and anything that Christians have to say. And I mean, when you think about it, and I used to kind of fight this, but I see it more and more, that Christians are, in a way, the only ones that it's okay to speak badly of publicly, or to persecute. I don't know that I felt, when I think of persecution, I think of pain and suffering. I know that we can be persecuted in other ways, but being prejudiced against Christians it's okay. It's just, it's okay. It seems to be okay. Whereas any other group of people, it's just people are appalled when there's any kind of prejudice going on.
Yeah, Neil and I watch crime shows, and anytime they introduce any kind of religious person whatsoever, we're like, oh, that's going to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
Sure enough, he'll be the hypocrite.
Yeah. And then I also think that people have managed to fall back on just calling someone stupid. Anytime you try to discredit someone, you just tell them, oh, they're dumb for thinking that. And, it's kind of a simple thing to say, but I've just noticed that more and more, even in politics. You think, well, if they don't like what someone says, they just call them stupid, make people think they're dumb. But I was thinking about how life experiences of people, whether it might be someone that has a harsh father, or a father that withholds love or is very punitive, that can affect how they feel about God. Decisions that they've made in their life that may have been bad. They've taken a wrong path, and it's hard to get back on the right path. And so they're going to go looking for information about God that might not cause them to want to believe in him. So I just think right now it's a difficult thing that we're going through, that there's a lot of doubt about who God is, and that we don't believe in him, and people who do believe in him are foolish or dumb or whatever. But God has put eternity in our hearts too. Ecclesiastes 3. And I think, hopefully I'm not taking that out of context, but there's part of every person that innately needs to know and wants to know about a higher being, and about God, and about eternity, and what happens after we die, and where, do we just go away, never to have any kind of existence again? So those are the kind of things that I wanted us to talk about. I had the same young woman, when she asked me, can you tell me what makes you believe without a doubt that God is real? And I gave her a few answers. This was kind of on the run. I had a doctor's appointment that morning, so I had to kind of give her a quick answer. And so I gave her a few answers. She wrote back and said that maybe a different God or goddess made the world. That was one of her answers. And I'm not discredit. Well, I'm not making fun of her in any way, shape, or form. I want people to be aware that this is what some young people are thinking. Then she also questioned, if God is all good and all powerful, then why is there, that's the whole evil, pain, and suffering question that we have all the time. And then again, why couldn't God have chosen another way besides sacrificing Jesus to save us? So first of all, I think trying to tackle the topic of why I believe that God is real beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I think I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, on that line, the first thing that popped in my head was creation. And, it's so hard to look around at the world and all the beauty in the world, and how everything was set in motion. And, science will never completely finish making new discoveries about this amazing earth. And to me, it just really points to a powerful creator. And so that was the first thing that came to my mind, the order, with the seasons, with synergy. And I thought about the intricacies when you think about the human body, or even things in nature, like even something as simple as the honeybee, and everything that's so intricate about that. So in my mind, that's a clear evidence. Only an all-powerful God could do something like this. Just look out your front door, either from the big picture and all the way down to the tiniest picture of a blade of grass, and it's to me, it's powerful proof of the existence of God. He orchestrated all of this and has kept it going. And so to me, that means that I can trust him with my life. If he can orchestrate all of this, he can certainly orchestrate my life, and has a better plan for it than I ever would. And it made me think of Romans 1:20. His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen since the creation of the world. So that was my number one reason.
Yeah, mine is very similar, but I titled it design. which is basically the same thing as what you're talking about. And there was a poster that my mom had in our house or in her office. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it had a picture of a watch. And if I'm remembering it right, the watch top was open and you could see all the little parts inside of it, the little intricate springs and the dials and things like that. And the caption on the poster said, "It's easier to think of a watch without a watchmaker than of a world without a world maker." And that was, my dad he was always interested in Christian evidences. And so it seemed like once a month he would preach on a different evidence that we had to be able to prove that God was who he said he was, and that the world was created by him, designed and created. It's interesting to me sometimes to hear and see a TV program that will be talking about something in nature and it'll say designed. They'll use the word designed, but that they're not necessarily believers there, because they'll talk about millions and millions of years that it took to for whatever to reach this point.
Right.
But my dad's dad, and I don't remember exactly why this happened, but he had one part of his leg amputated below the knee on one leg, and then part of his foot on the other side. And when he died, my dad kept his prosthesis, and it just looked like a leg. So it was the calf and the foot, and it was just tan plastic. Of course, this was back in the 70s, I want to say, when it happened. So they've come up with a whole lot more sophisticated designs now. But Dad kept that, and sometimes he would bring it out in some of his lessons and talk about, here is man's best attempt to replicate a leg. And I believe it was a debate that Tom Warren had, and I can't remember if I'm saying that the name, if it was him or someone else, but I think it was Tom Warren and Anthony Flew, and he talked about the evidence of design. And I'm thinking that he brought up the human hand, and he said, which one, he had a prototype, and then he had, he held up his hand and he said, now, which one was designed and which one came about as a result of chance, evolved over millions of years, whatever. And I don't know, seems like John told me that Anthony Flew never would answer this question, but when you think about that, when you think about a prosthesis that's made that the best minds in the world have come up with, whatever it is, and it's still subpar to what we have on our bodies, what we're born with, a hand, with the opposing fingers, and feet that balance, toes that each one of your toes has something to do with your balance. And so when there's a prosthetic on your leg or on your hand or whatever, it might work, but it doesn't work as well as the one that God designed. And so to think that someone would say that this crude attempt at replicating what happened over nature, that just doesn't make sense. God designed our bodies. And think about the eye and how intricate they are. And, I don't know much about them, but I know that images come in and they're upside down, and our body, whatever it is in our eye, turns it the right way. And so we are able to see both, up close, and then it automatically adjusts so that we can see far away. And that, that was supposedly just happened as a matter of chance, or it was designed by a designer. Of course it was designed. And then babies developing, when the process of conception occurs, and then all the cells divide and it attaches to the uterine wall, and then the baby grows, and just the process of birth is so fascinating to me. And how does the baby know that it's time to be born? How does the body get the baby out? All those things. And things like when I've got scratches all over my legs and my arms from being outside and knocking down cedars, but all the little blood cells or whatever, I shouldn't even say anything here because I don't know how it exactly works, but things go to work in your body and it scabs over, and while it's under that scab, it's being healed. So if someone came up with a car that was, it went through a wreck, and then, something happened inside the body of the car and it scabbed over. And then a week later, the car had healed itself. I mean, we'd be amazed by that, but yet that's what our bodies do. I was thinking about the Titan sub, the one that tragedy of a few weeks ago, that how it was designed by some man and it worked a few times, but then it didn't. But yet the things that God has put in motion and put in place in our earth here are amazing. The world, how it tilts on just the right axis, and the tides come in, and the seasons change. And I have to look at my notes because I can't remember all those things, but how we're the perfect distance from the sun. If we were any further away, we'd all freeze. If we were any closer, we would all burn up. Oxygen that we breathe, we have the right amount. And I know that people would say, well, what about all the things that go wrong? What about our bodies that have things that go wrong, and we maybe there's a cancer or some kind of sickness that prevents us from healing. And I think a lot of those are a result of everything that's wrong with the world is a result of sin entering the world and consequences of that. But God designed it perfectly, and we're the ones that messed it up. But so many things about that were designed by God. Our intelligence, the way we can think things through, and our creativity comes from Him. The fact that we can invent things and adapt to things, God put that in us, and it's just not something that it doesn't make sense with the way evolution occurs. We have microevolution. There are things that happen and change over time within species, I know. And I'm going to quit talking here because I'll say something that's completely off the wall and it won't make any sense. But I just keep thinking about all of the elements of design and evidence of God's hand, like you were saying, in creation and bringing this world about. That to me is the very reason why I know that God is real, because I would not be here. You would not be here. None of us would be here if God had not designed us and created us and put us on this earth. Psalm 19, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. So He doesn't necessarily stand in front of us and say, Kathy, I'm here and I'm real. But there's everything that you can look at and everything that we can touch and taste, the things in your garden. Think about, I know you're not growing corn, but when I look at an ear of corn and how many kernels of corn are on one ear, and yet that came from one kernel of corn. And so there's so many lessons about God and how we can't outgive God, and how He blesses and blesses again. And it's just, there's so much evidence for the existence of God and knowing that He is real.
And along those lines of things you've mentioned, I want to go ahead before I forget and give a couple of resources that probably a lot of the people that would be listening to this podcast are already familiar with, but Apologetics Press. There's a lot of great guys that work there that are way smarter than we are. Way smarter. And they have so many great resources that they've made available on these topics. And you can either go to their website and just look up articles that have been written on it, but you can also find books and things like that to buy. And then the other one is Christian Courier. And that one's not so much apologetics as it is just theological questions, as some of the ones that you mentioned in the beginning. Why would God do this? Why has God done this? Why hasn't He done this? They've written on a lot of those types of topics as well in a really well thought out way. And so you can just go to Christian Courier, go to their little search area and type in your question, and probably something's been written on it already by one of them, just to have an extra resource, just to get some thoughts. For sure, they'll point you to some scriptures for further study.
Both of them are very easily searchable. In fact, I went and looked, I just searched intelligent design, and I don't know how many things came up under Apologetics Press. So they're an excellent resource. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so that was my number one. Do you have a number two?
Well, the number two was leaning more toward the part about how can we trust His ways. why he's chosen to do things the way he has and laid out the plan that he has. And the thing that came to my mind was his omniscience. And this character of God is just that it just means that he's all knowing. And what I mean by that is he sees the big picture, and there's no way I can or ever will. And he sees the big timeline from eternity to eternity, and there's no way we can or ever will. Mm-hmm. And so even in the things that we might delegate, we take everything as good or bad. This is a horrible thing. This is a good thing. This is a bad event. This is a good event. But sometimes God can, somebody's at the, oh, those are my kids. They're at the door. Okay. Come in. Hey, I'm recording. I'm just recording the podcast. Do you want to come stick your face in the screen and say hi? No. Okay. I'm sorry.
Which kids?
It's Carl and Emily. Come over here and say hi. It's Carl and Emily.
Do they have Rich?
Do you have Rich?
Of course they have Rich. They need to put Rich's face
They
in.
have Rich also. Okay. Well, we are right in the middle of a conversation about God.
Well, let's just look at a baby and see God's design in this baby.
Here is God's
there
design.
He is.
Here's Rich.
Hi, Rich baby.
Are we gonna be famous?
Bring him over here. Look at there.
See. Hi, Rich.
He just had a bunch of sweet potatoes.
He's looking at
me. Good. He's got some on his face.
Sweet.
Well, anyway, hey guys. Yes.
Podcasting.
Yeah. So sorry.
You're all good.
Love y'all. Okay. He's saying call later.
Okay.
Bye. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. See you later.
Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, that was a happy interruption. That was a good one. Got to see the baby.
Oh, that's always good.
Yeah.
I love that they are close enough for us to be able to see him. So them, all of them. I mean, all of them.
Yeah. Not just the baby.
Not just the baby.
Yeah. Sure.
What was I even saying? Oh, and we
I'm glad it was your turn.
First
I'd be like, what?
Where was I? Cheese on the brain. Now this. But we delegate things as either good or bad. Well, God sees the big picture and orchestrates even the bad things into something that ultimately turns out for the good. And you can see that when you look back through history, maybe even in your own personal life, at some point you have the blessing of being able to look back and get that perspective and say, oh, I can see how ultimately this worked for good, but He sees all of that in every life and every nation and every circumstance from eternity to eternity. He sees the big picture, and we never will. And to me, that just means that I can relax and turn the reins over to Him and trust His plan. We know beyond the shadow of a doubt of His love for us because of what He was willing to do for us.
Right.
And so that means because He knows everything and I don't, He has infinite understanding and I don't, then I can trust Him, even if I don't always have all the answers. And I think that's a big part of the challenge for all of us, especially in this age of Google, whatever you want to know. Yeah. Some things we're just not going to know or completely understand. Nothing that's going to prevent us from having faith. Nothing that's going to keep us in the dark about anything we need to know for our life. But sometimes we're just not going to be able to grasp it because we're not God. And we're not omniscient, but I can trust Him to act accordingly because He is omniscient. Oswald Chambers said that faith is deliberate confidence in the character of God. And I think that's what this all boils down to. My favorite verse for a long time has been Psalm 18:30. And it's, as for God, His way is perfect. The word of the Lord is proven, and He is a shield to all who trust in Him.
Yeah. John and I were driving back from Corpus today, and I was trying to articulate this to him. In this discussion about how do we know that God is real and how do we know that God is all good, to a person that doesn't have that faith, or to a person that doesn't believe or doesn't know if they believe or struggling in their belief, there is an element of faith. Mm-hmm. And it's all over Scripture. All over Scripture is have faith. and trust, but it's not a blind faith.
Right.
There's evidence and there's
it's not a
reason
leap in the
to have
dark.
faith. Right. And so I was trying to figure out a way of saying this, that how important is our faith? And if you look throughout scripture and realize how God has said to trust him, like you just said, that he's a shield to those who trust him. And there's countless verses that talk about having faith in him and just trusting. And we've said that to our kids so many times. Do you trust me? Because there's some things that we just know, and whatever, maybe it's the age that they are at, that they're not going to understand, or they are still so immature that they want what they want without taking into account what's best. And then, we reach an age where we finally, we hopefully do, I'm still struggling with it myself, but where we do the things that we know we're supposed to do because it's the right thing to do rather than what we want to do, whether it's food that we eat, obviously you get to an age where you realize you can't just eat Cocoa Puffs all day because you won't have health, even though you might want to. And so do you trust me? Not enough to know as a 2-year-old, do you trust mom? Do you trust mama? And of course we don't have that argument with a 2-year-old, but I'm still not articulating it well, but I just feel like there's that element of faith is so crucial and so important. And if you don't want to have it, you're not going to have it. But if you want to, God rewards that desire for faith. The man that expressed, he said, I believe, but help my unbelief. I feel like I need that all over my house, because there's times that, I think about the passage that says, if you have faith that you can move this mountain, you can move this mountain. And I'm terrible at remembering exactly how the verse is worded, but it's not so much that I doubt that God could move that mountain. It's that I doubt that it's God's will. Why would he move that mountain? If it's not his will, he's not going to do it. So I have every faith that he could, but I don't have faith necessarily that he will, because I ask him to. So that's kind of a struggle that I have sometimes. It's help my unbelief in maybe not knowing what your will is. But there's that prayer that never fails, to ask for that God's will be done. And that if you ask everything according to his will, he hears us, he answers us. And being at peace with that, and knowing that just because I don't know the answer doesn't mean that God is not working. It just means that I don't know the answer right now. And I think that there's certain personalities that need answers, and they need to know, or they just really, really want to understand this. And they struggle and they wrestle and they just, lie awake wondering and worrying about what is the answer to this, when God, like you said, we're just not going to know in this lifetime. But if we trust God, we can be at peace with that, because we know that whatever it is that he does is good. And I've seen that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The beautiful thing is that sometimes we may be frustrated just with ourselves because we feel like our faith is too small when we're questioning or we don't understand. But the beautiful thing is, if you just hang on and keep trusting, there are things that as you live life and as you keep growing and maturing, you keep walking with God, there are things that you grow in understanding. And I believe that your faith does grow and your trust does grow, and you feel more confident in it, that blessed assurance that we sing about, and you can look back and see that growth. And God wants us to keep growing in him, and he makes that possible. And maybe if we're just frustrated with ourselves because we can't see it, or we don't think it's possible that we'll grow in our understanding, well, then let that be another area of trust, and let that go. And just hang on and keep walking with him, and let him help you in that. As you spend more time in the word, as you see him being faithful to his promises, that faith and that trust and understanding will grow. And it's kind of interesting that I've been spending some time camped out in Hebrews lately. And I always love when something comes up like this question that we knew we wanted to talk about. And it seems like all of a sudden you start seeing things everywhere. But in Hebrews, I was really caught up with this whole idea of what faithfulness is, and it's not that you'll never struggle or doubt. It's just that you'll never let go. You'll never give up. You'll be faithful to the end, as the phrases are. And Hebrews 6:19, I've always thought about that verse, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul. But the end of the verse right before it says, take hold of that hope. And I looked at that word, and it really is like this almost mental picture of just grabbing on with both hands and just holding on to get as close as possible as you can to something. And that's what this is. Even when, maybe you're in the middle of a storm or you don't understand or things are happening, just take hold of that hope and don't give up, keep walking and don't give up. And then I think God will bring you that peace and that understanding and that growth and maturity and all those things that you're so desperately wanting or think that you should already have. We can trust him to help us through that and help provide that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought. It's funny you brought that up, that Hebrews 6:19, this hope we have is an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. I had this mental picture. This kind of hit me last year during lectureship when I don't remember who was talking about it, but I had this mental picture of us in a boat in the middle of a storm. And, the waves are blowing us back and forth and the wind is just going crazy and we're just barely hanging on. But yet that anchor, the faith that we have, it says that hope both sure and steadfast, one that enters within the veil where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us. So I had this mental picture of Jesus on the other side of the veil. We can't see him, whether, heaven, whatever realm, how we want to think of it mentally. He's holding on to that anchor. That's where we place our hope and our faith, and he's holding on. And as long as we're in that boat, then he's hanging on to us, and we're going to be okay while we're in this world. And you and I both know, we've seen it. There are storms we go through, and we're rocked, to our very core. We have all kinds of scary moments and things that happen in life. But just on the other side of that veil, Jesus is hanging on to us. He's got that anchor in his hand. And that was just such a mental picture. I even drew it out, and I don't know what I did with it. Maybe it's on my iPad somewhere, but I just drew it out because it was so encouraging to me to think about. He's not letting go. There's nothing. Romans 8, there's nothing that will separate us from his love. There's nothing in this world that can do that. We can let go, but we don't have to. And, I'm not going to. So there's that faith that you're talking about. And
I'd love to see that drawing.
I'll see if I can find it. It was scribbled, but it was just so helpful to me to think about that. It's not up to me, I guess. That's the bottom line. I make the choice to stay in the boat. I make the choice to put my trust and my faith and my hope in him. And that hope is not just our word hope. We think about, I hope I get to, I hope we finish on time.
Maybe.
It's not that kind of hope.
That's not a good hope.
Yeah. It's something that we're confident in. And because he's the one that's in control and in charge. So
maybe we're just so used to people letting us down. And I'm not even talking about people we know, but just the world in general. And you think about all the things that you find out through the years, this is what you've been taught. It's not actually true, and we've mentioned this before, but whether it has to do with what's good for you, health-wise, they come back around and say, actually, the total opposite, the exact opposite is actually the case, and that happens all the time. And, or, think about the fiasco that politics is right now. There's just so many things that are going to let you down and disappoint, promise one thing and not deliver. claim to be an expert and then find out later they were wrong. That is our world. Right. That is our world. But that's not the creator of our world. And like you were saying, he's holding on to that anchor, and that's the one sure and steadfast thing that we can rely on, no matter what. And we will never find out that he was mistaken or wrong. He'll never let us down. Any of those things that we do experience in this world made up of humans who are not omniscient or perfect, right. we won't experience that with God.
Well, that personality type that needs to know, that wants an answer, that wrestles, and it's an anxiousness that, I think that God really, he doesn't want us to have that. He doesn't want us to be anxious. He tells us not to be anxious, and I know in particular this one friend of mine that she doesn't want to be anxious. She's not trying to be. She's struggling with her faith, not even struggling with her faith. She wants answers. And she's trying to get to the place where she can just trust God. Sorry. I suggested to her that, man, I got a tickle now. Great. That she write down her questions in a notebook. Whatever question it is, give each page. We can have all kinds of interruptions today. It's tickling.
Hey, this is unedited.
Yeah,
right?
Unscripted.
We've always said unscripted,
sure.
Unedited.
Yeah. Anyway, I suggest she write all her questions down, even one question per page. And then if she's found some answers, whether it's in scripture or someone gives her a good answer, write it down in a little section on that page. Close it, set it down for the night, and know that she can come back to it when she has an opportunity or when she wants to. But try to learn to leave her questions there and trust God that he'll answer what needs to be answered. And, if she's not going to get an answer, be at peace with that. And then later, whether it's a week from now, a month from now, 10 years from now, look back and see how continuing in her faith and deciding to put her faith and trust in God, he answers her. Maybe not in the way that maybe not in the way she wants an answer, that God's going to come down and say, okay, here is your answer. But even in hard things that happen, seeing how placing her trust in him was not misguided or not, it wasn't a misplaced trust, but it was a good trust. So yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to do it because I have questions. I have questions about why I need to cough right now. Excuse me. Okay, that was both of our number ones. Oh no, that was your number two?
That was my number two.
That was your number two. I haven't done number two. We are not going to be boorish and immature. Can't do it. Okay. I'm trying to talk about why I believe God is God, and you're laughing at me.
Hey,
I have a tickle in my throat.
You said it.
How old are you?
I know. I'm sorry.
Okay.
As I was saying earlier, we will all grow on to maturity. I just haven't gotten there yet.
I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm sorry. I don't even have a cold.
Do you want me to go ahead and do my third one? And that way, maybe your tickle will go away by then.
Okay. But I'm still going to have to cough.
Okay. You can cough while I talk.
Okay.
So my third one was his faithfulness. And this goes along again with this whole idea of how we can trust him and why things are the way they are. And his faithfulness. And I was thinking, for sure we see that in the word. He was faithful to the children of Israel and all of his promises and all the things that he said he would do for them or would happen to them. It all came to pass. In Deuteronomy 7:9, know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. Psalm 33:4, all his work is done in faithfulness. And to me, that's the big picture on his part. Even though we don't understand it, it's done in faithfulness, and ultimately it's for good, and we can trust that. Hebrews 10:23, back in Hebrews again. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And then the last one I wrote down is my favorite one, because I think it ties back to that whole when we often struggle because of suffering of some sort. 1 Peter 4:9 says that, therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful creator while doing good. So even if you're going through something, just keep on trusting in him, keep on doing good, and he'll be faithful through that. And I think that promise is very encouraging. And to me, that's just one of the things that, again, as you get a little more seasoned in life, you can look back and you can see God's faithfulness, even in those times when maybe your faith wavered.
Yeah.
Maybe you weren't the person you should have been. Maybe your behavior went way off track, but he was ready for you to come back to him. And he was faithful.
Looking for you.
He was looking for you. Yeah. And all of these verses completely dispel this whole image that sometimes people want us to have of God, of this, like you mentioned in the beginning, what is your view of God to begin with? If it's some sort of dictator, if it's some sort of, all powerful being that's just waiting for you to fail and trying to make things as difficult as possible for you to be faithful to him, that's not true. And that's not the message that we find in scripture. It paints a completely different picture of him, his faithfulness as a loving God who sees everything, who understands our questions, and is patient with us as we work through them. In the meantime, continuing to be our loving God, our loving Father, and continuing to be faithful to us, right, even if we wrestle with our own faithfulness to him.
Yeah, it's good. And I think that ties in too, that's with the same thing we were talking about, that there's an element of faith that God requires. And a lot of people want God to prove himself to them, and then they'll have faith. But I think biblically, he tells us to have faith. But at the beginning, at the very beginning. Well, my second one is, why do I believe God is God? Is kind of the way I phrased it. Sorry, tickle. But God is different from gods. My friend that said maybe some other god or goddess created the world. And then even just reading that made me sad. And I didn't do a lot of research to find out if there were some other quote God, little g god or goddess that claimed to create the world or to create humanity. I don't know. But when I think about Greek mythology and all of those myths that you read about, and the ones that the Greeks were familiar with, they were, what's your mental image? To me, they're aloof, and they are demanding, and they're cruel. And I know that not every myth has that element of cruelty in it, but they were pretty heartless. There's myths of these gods raping humans and murdering humans. But our God came to earth in the form of a helpless baby for the purpose of delivering us and rescuing us and redeeming us. And our God is just so different from any other quote God that has ever been spoken of in history. And when you think about all of those Old Testament and New Testament passages that talk about people worshiping idols, which it just doesn't make any sense, on just a very basic level, to worship something that you created with your own hands. Why would you do that? And there's passages that talk about that, how the work of man's hands, they're wood and stone. They don't see or hear or eat or smell. And that one is in Deuteronomy 4. But I also looked at the context in Psalm 115. That's the verse that we like, that says, not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory. But it goes on to say, in verse 3, our God is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of man's hands. They have mouths, but they cannot speak. They have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. They have noses, but they cannot smell. They have hands, but they cannot feel. They have feet, but they cannot walk. They cannot make a sound with their throat. And then he says, those who make them will become like them, everyone who trusts in them. It says, O Israel, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. Mm-hmm. So it's, why would anyone want to put their trust into some quote God that cares nothing for them? It doesn't make any sense. And so I was thinking about Paul when he went to Athens, and he observed that city full of idols. And you haven't been there, have you, to Athens?
Not yet.
But you will this fall. It was such an amazing, talk about faith building, to stand on Mars Hill, where Paul gave this speech to the Athenians there. And you can see just up, within, 500 yards, the Acropolis with the Parthenon on top, the Parthenon that was the temple to Athena. Mm-hmm. And that there was a statue there, and that temple was 500 years old, at least 500 years old when Paul was there. So, that's old, mm-hmm. Something that's 500 years old. And then when Paul was there, but when Paul stood there on Mars Hill, and he was reasoning with them, and he said, I observed that you're very religious. I was passing through, examining the objects of your worship. I found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. You know this. Mm-hmm. What you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you: the God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with human hands. And I could just see Paul standing there pointing up to that temple that was dedicated to this lifeless idol that they all worshiped. And they had these little idols, household idols of Athena that they would take home. And Paul is saying, I don't worship something that was made with human hands. I worship the living God. He goes on to say, the God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all people life and breath and all things. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times, that they would seek God, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and exist, as even some of your own poets have said. So, just imagining those Athenians standing around him while he points up to that temple up there, and he said, I serve the God who's living and breathing, and you can find him because he's right here among us. He's living and breathing, as opposed to dead and lifeless. And it's just so encouraging to me. And thinking about, did any other God do what our God did? Mm-hmm. No other God did that. Did any other God desire to have a relationship with us? I've not heard of anyone like that. Did any other God communicate that love to us? And that's what sets him apart, is his love for us and what he did in coming to earth. Philippians 2, is it, that talks about that he took on the form of a servant, and he humbled himself, and he came to us. And when you look at scripture throughout the Old Testament, that God calls us to him. He's been calling us back to him, and he comes and dwells. He dwelled in the tabernacle, and in the temple. And, he chases us because he wants a relationship with us. And there's no other God that did anything like that, because they're not real. There is no other God that is real.
Right.
And then there's all the prophecies about Jesus, about Jesus coming, and I'm not good at explaining those. And I did a lot of research for an article that I wrote about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so, when that's, like you said, there's a really deep topic, and I understand the very surface of it. But the prophecies, when you understand, you have to understand a little bit about how we got the Bible, and that's not an easy thing. But if you really want to know, you'll find out. But the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, there were 800, somewhere around 800 recovered manuscripts there at the Dead Sea. And among them were fragments of copies of every Old Testament book except for Esther. And they dated some, I want to say, I think I wrote it down. Some of them were from the 2nd century before Jesus was born. And this is something that it took me a long time to understand, because in my not understanding how we got the Bible, the manuscripts that were copied and how old they were, because in my mind, I thought, well, it's easy to write something about something that's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the prophecies and the proof that we have that they were written before these things ever happened, it's just very faith building and solidifying. So prophecies, that's something that helps me to know that God is who he said he is. So you've already given your number 3. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say along those lines, if this is something that parents want to sit down and help build their children's faith with, Come Fill Your Cup has, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying there's Bible marking articles there on these topics for free. That there's one on fulfilled prophecy, where you can go from scripture to scripture and see how things were prophesied hundreds of years before they literally happened. There's one on scientific foreknowledge, which is about all the things in the Bible that are scientific evidences and proofs that God inspired men to write about long before science actually discovered it for themselves. There's one on God's faithfulness. There's one on the character of God. So a lot of these things that we've been talking about would be really great to either, for yourself or for your children, just sit down and walk through and have these scriptures marked in their Bibles, so that maybe when they're up against some of these questions, they can be armed and go back and fortify their faith by spending time in the Word.
Yeah, because those prophecies it's a pretty deep topic, deep subject. And it's something I still, I need to learn a whole lot more about and have more knowledge about, but it's a growth process. So that's a good idea to go and find those Bible marking topics. And I'm sure there's in Apologetics Press and Christian Courier, there would be things that they could read there. The third one that I had written down, which is, it's a whole topic in itself, and I don't know if I can do it any justice, but why did God have to save us the way he did? Why did Jesus have to die? It's an emotional subject, and it is. I remember thinking this as a young person, that God could have chosen any way that he wanted to save mankind. Why couldn't he just say, I forgive you? Why couldn't he just, why did it have to involve blood and Jesus's blood and Jesus's death? And again, I think that's an ongoing process of understanding, and it's something that we have to meditate on and pray about and think about and want to understand, and go to the Bible and go to scripture and understand the holiness of God. And I feel like I go to my grandchildren, because I've just learned a lot of things from them. I've learned that God is not a grandfather, because God would let us get away with anything if he were a grandfather. That's why God is our father, because we need discipline sometimes. But there was something that happened, and I can't remember if I've mentioned it on here before, but it really, really helped me to understand the justice of God. Because, a lot of people think that if God really loved me, he wouldn't punish. If he loved mankind, he wouldn't punish. Why, like you said, if he knew that so many people were not going to obey him or would not end up in heaven, then why did he create us? And but the wrath of God, he is so righteous and he is so holy that he cannot be in the presence of evil or sin or any of that. And yet we are sinful. So he had to go to certain lengths and to be able to cleanse us from that sin, so that he can be in our presence. But one of the things that happened with Emmy and Jackson when they were pretty little, they're only 14 months apart. So I don't think she was even walking at the time. So he must have been maybe 2.5 and she was like 1.5. And we were babysitting them in their room while Jordan and Aaron had a study going on in their living room. And Emmy was standing at her little play kitchen. She was just leaning up against it, kind of playing with her things. And Jackson had one of those little toy grocery carts. And he saw it coming and couldn't stop it in time, but he just went running towards her and rammed her. And, he just knocked her over. And of course, she started bawling, and he did it on purpose. It was obvious that he did it on purpose. And John fussed at him, and I don't think he had ever fussed at him before, but he said, "Jackson, we do not hurt your sister." And, he was very stern with them. And it was a voice of John that Jackson had never heard before. And it shocked him. And he just started boo-hooing, which, broke my heart.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is, and I know that this was not any kind of sin on Jackson's part. He was too little for that. It was just, he was being a little kiddo. But, we loved Jackson and we love Emmy, and Jackson hurt Emmy. That didn't negate our love for Jackson at all. But Jackson needed to know that was not acceptable. And when I thought about, well, this is it. This is sin hurts people that God loves. And it's people that perpetuate, or they're the ones that are inflicting that pain on God's children. And so God has to, in order to be a just God, any judge would not be considered just if he did not punish what was wrong and what was evil and sinful. And so God has to do that to be just. So he created this way. He put into effect, as your things are hurting your ears.
Yeah, my headphones are hurting my ears. Go ahead.
Well, so he saved us from himself. That's one of the word, the wrath of God was satisfied. I've always wanted to find a different way of saying that, because the word satisfied makes me think, it just has this connotation in my mind of God being happy with that. And that's not exactly what that means. It just means that there had to be a punishment, and that satisfied the punishment when Jesus took our punishment. So, it's such a deep topic, and I don't think I do it any justice, but that little incident helped me to see that God still loves the one who inflicts, the one that's wrong, but he also has to punish, because it's unjust. It would be unjust if God didn't punish wrongdoing.
An interesting aspect of the wrath of God came up in our Revelation class that Hiram Kemp is teaching on Sunday mornings. And he was talking about how, we, in a sense, part of the wrath of God involves taking vengeance on those who practice evil on the innocent.
Right.
And that is God's justice. When we see, just horrific things that take place in the world, small children being molested, trafficking. I mean, there are all kinds of horrific things. People that practice evil, just sheer evil on other people. And, it sounds harsh, but maybe part of the purpose of the wrath of God is to take care of that as well. But when you think about it in light of, even then, God wants those practicing evil, to repent. Even then, he wants them to repent and turn away from their evil ways and come to him and be a child of his and be with him for eternity. But there is a place reserved for those who will not turn away from evil and turn to God. And Neil used to preach this sermon. I forget what he called it, but it was something about like the roadblocks on the path to hell or something like that. And it was this whole idea of God isn't, sending us on this careening path to hell. And when we decide to turn to him, oh, rats, now they're not going to go there. Instead, he has put all these barriers in place to try everything he possibly can without forcing us to prevent us from going there.
Yeah. I would like to hear. Do you have that recorded somewhere? Do you know?
Probably.
Might have to find that and be able
Yeah.
to post it in the group.
Mhm.
Well, it's a difficult subject, and I struggle sometimes with, there's people who have hurt people I love, and you want them to be punished, and then I think to myself, should I feel that way? Should
Mhm.
I want them to be in heaven, but I don't want them to live close to me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a struggle with my own attitude about seeing people as God sees them, I guess.
Mhm.
And I guess because we're human, we're not going to be able to see them completely as God sees them. But anyway, so difficult subject to talk about. And I don't know if we've done it any justice at all, but it's a conversation, and
Mhm.
it's not, I don't think that either one of us thought that we could really solve it for anyone, but we could maybe get a conversation started
Mhm.
between the two of us, and maybe open up some discussion between people at home and with people that you trust. Go to someone that you trust and ask your questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If someone asks you a question like this, welcome it and help them find the answer to it. And if you have the same question, then
Mhm.
admit it, and go to someone, and go to your Bible, and just do some research and some look, and try to understand as much as you can about God's plan, and trust
Yeah.
God. To me, the believe your beliefs and doubt your doubts. Sometimes I think we get so caught up in the doubts, and thinking that we just spiral downward in our doubt, to where it
Mhm.
makes it harder and harder to believe our beliefs. But I trust God completely and wholly and fully, and I don't know everything, and I know I'm not ever going to know everything, and I'm okay with that. I
Mhm.
think getting to a place where you're okay with knowing that you're not going to know everything is it brings me a peace.
And I think this is a conversation that we can have more in our homes. And as I mentioned earlier, I feel like I should have done a better job with that with our own sons. And I think a lot of it was just that whole fear factor. They're asking questions that they're just naturally having. And just because they were different from the questions I had,
Mhm.
I probably should have, it probably showed on my face when they asked the questions, what was going on in mom, the fear, the
Mhm.
wondering, where's this coming from, you know, but how important is it to keep the conversations going and to create that environment, not just with our children, but with our brothers and sisters and our friends, where they know we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's just keep the conversation going. Let's keep our Bibles open. Let's keep praying for each other and create a comfortable space where we can bring out these questions and discuss them without labeling people, or making assumptions about them. But I think that this would probably generate some good discussion in our Facebook group.
Well,
Looking up to.
be humble enough to admit you don't know everything.
Yeah.
It's harder for some of us than others, but it really is okay to not know everything.
Mhm.
I don't know nearly as much as I should, but I think when we admit that we don't know everything, that it helps other people to open up and say, well, I don't either. But I want to know the answer, and let's go find the answer.
Mhm.
God respects when we open his word and do our best to find answers to questions. And then when we can't, we trust him to know what's right and to do what's right. And he is always going to do the right thing. We can always trust him to do the right thing.
And we can trust that he has already given us everything we need for life and godliness.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And there's other things beyond that we just don't need to know.
That's right.
Okay. Well, good discussion, and I appreciate your input, and it was fun to see Rich and Carl and Emily.
They were so embarrassed. Emily's face.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, so embarrassed.
No, it'll be great. Be great.
Yeah.
Well, our random question this week is what is, or is it better grammar to say, what are one or two modern inventions that have made your life easier?
Mhm. So I don't know if this one's a modern invention, but the washing machine tops my list. And I feel like we've already had this conversation, but because I've been to places where you have to hand wash your clothes, and I just don't have the arm strength for it or the hand strength to wring those things out. Your hand strength, to wring this. So the washing machine, I love. I love my Speed Queen washing machine.
Speed Queen? I've never heard of that.
Speed Queen, yes. We had one of those front end loaders that I thought I always wanted, and absolutely hated. And I just wanted to go back to a basic top loader, good spinning washing machine without all the bells and whistles. So it's easier to repair. And Jim Fuqua, one of our members here, had his own appliance store for decades, and he recommended Speed Queen.
I've never heard of a Speed Queen.
Yes. So it's great. We're absolutely loving it, but this isn't.
Does it have an agitator?
Yes.
When I had one without an agitator, which they said, would save water and all that kind of stuff. And I hated it.
Yeah.
I know. I hated it. And it would, it had this much water, and I kept thinking, if I'm looking in there and I can see clothes above the water line, how are they getting clean?
Yeah.
And when we were cleaning up and getting Janice and Grady's house ready to sell, we ended up putting our washer and dryer in their house because we were selling their house with washer and dryer. And I brought hers home, and it had an agitator. It was just one of those good old fashioned. It was older than my machine, but it's so much better than the one I had. Just that newfangled stuff.
Newfangled stuff.
Always good.
They can have it. They can have it.
Yeah. Well, here's a newfangled thing that I like.
Go ahead.
Is a remote keyless entry, both on the car and on the house.
Oh, you always do the cool stuff.
Well, I try to be cool. Do you not have that in your car? The push button start?
Yes.
So you can get into your car without having to put a key in the
that's true. That's great.
So that's my favorite thing, because I hate digging in my purse for my keys. I don't know what it is about digging in my purse for something that just makes me grouchy. I think I may have said that before. It's probably a little indication of my impatience. But anyway, you can put one on your house too. And we've done that here and in Denver. And so if someone needs to get in your house and you're not there, instead of hiding a key somewhere, you can give them the code. And so they can just push the code in and they can get in the house. So you do have one? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You haven't told me the code. You must not trust me.
I'll text really you when we're done.
Okay. It does help when you have an armful of stuff and you're not having to juggle for your keys. And I have just loved that. We've got one, like I said, both here and in Denver. So it has been very helpful.
Yeah, that's a good one.
What were you going to say before
I like the remote start also, because you could be in the church building and it's cold outside and you can start your vehicle. And
that's against the law in Denver. They call it huffing.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't know if it's the exhaust or if they say because cars get stolen when you start them up, but we can do that on ours. And I don't know. I have heard people have actually gotten citations in Denver for huffing.
Interesting. Well,
yeah.
My other one is not very exciting. And when I first got it, I didn't really think I would like it, but it's the Instant Pot. And in my mind, I thought, here's something else to take up counter space, or try and figure out where to store and all that. But I use it every single week to make yogurts, and I do beans and chicken broth and just all kinds of things in there. So, but especially yogurt. So it really has become just a staple that I use all the time. So that's my other one.
Yeah. Mom used to use just a pressure cooker, but she threatened Doug and me within an inch of our lives if we touched anything on it, because it had that little thing that sat on the top and it would shake. And I think Doug, just to aggravate her, would go by and he would touch it and it would make a noise and she'd fuss at him. But so I was always intimidated by pressure cookers. But when they came out with the Instant Pot, I'm not afraid to do that. I make black-eyed peas and pinto beans in those. But my other one would be, have you seen those little egg cookers that, it's maybe 6 inches high and has a little dome lid, and you can, it makes like 6 or 7 boiled eggs easily, because it steams them. Really, it doesn't boil them. So my new breakfast, I'm not eating cottage cheese every morning, but my new breakfast is deviled eggs that I can make for 1 point on Weight Watchers with Greek yogurt and a little bit of ranch dressing. But anyway, you can make those eggs and then it's just easier. I don't know.
Are they easy to peel?
Well, if you put them like when it finishes, it takes like 6 minutes or so, but then immediately you put them in an ice bath for, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, and then they're easier to peel than regular boiled eggs.
And those are small.
Yeah. It doesn't take up counter space. It just goes in my cabinet.
Well, that's
So
cool.
wow, we are really spoiled to silly little things.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
So instead of it taking 10 minutes to boil eggs, I can do it in 6 minutes. So I save 4 whole minutes.
And what are you going to do with those 4 whole minutes?
Stand there and tap my feet waiting for the 6 minutes to be over with, right?
When are they going to introduce the 2-minute steamer? That's what I want to know.
And maybe an egg, when they come up with an egg peeler that you don't have to do, or a clothes putter awayer, that's going to be what I'm going to love.
Yeah.
Because I hate putting clothes away. I'm really revealing how terrible I am of silly things. There's something at Costco now, at Sam's actually, that I think it's cleaning the floors, but it's like a robot. And it's going by itself slowly, and you hear it beeping. But if you step in its way, it makes a noise and it stops and it pivots and it goes the other way. And it's just
cleaning how? Like mopping?
No, I guess vacuuming, but it may actually be like checking stock or something, because it just slowly goes down the aisles, or maybe, I don't know what it's doing. Maybe it's reading my brain somehow. I don't know.
It's scanning you.
Yeah.
Speaking of Costco, I asked Neil to pick up, he went by Costco when he was out of town, and asked him to pick up another one of those dresses, that link that I shared in looking up. And that Costco had them marked all the way down to $2.
Nice.
But they were all sold out.
Oh, so you didn't get them.
But they still have them online for $10. So
okay, good deal.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway,
I never did go by there.
Good conversation.
Yes. Good conversation about some serious stuff and not so serious stuff. And we would love to hear, we really, really would love to hear your comments, and maybe some of you have some better ways of explaining or discussing the topics that we've brought up today. And we're praying for so many people out there that are just confused or searching or wondering or struggling. And, I just want people to know that we're right there with you too. And we have confidence that God's going to do the right thing always, but we just don't exactly always know how. And sometimes I struggle with things like that too. So we would love to hear from you, and we appreciate all of you so much for listening and for commenting and for being our friends. And we are looking forward to maybe seeing some of you before too long at different events that are coming up in the future. And we're just thankful for you. You have anything you want to add?
Nope.
Did I remember everything?
Oh, yes. Good job.
Have I mentioned that I like it better when you get to intro and outro people? I will let you know. I like it better when Kathy does. Yeah. Well, it's been a good conversation, and I love you, and I miss you and wish I could see you in person. But until next time,
keep looking up.
All right.
Love you.
Look up. Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.